This is Angela Midgley, a research staff developer.
And this is Denise Chilton, leadership coach. And you're listening to a Making Impact special as part of the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the University of Liverpool Academy's Developing Practice podcast. In this special episode for Making an Impact, myself, Alex Owen, academic developer, and Matt Davis, organisational developer, sat down with Denise Chilton, a specialist in leadership coaching and coaching training, and Angela Midgley, one of our research staff developers. We discussed how coaching can support researchers to maximise their potential and what we mean when we talk about researcher wellbeing. We hope you enjoy.
We're really pleased to be speaking with you both today as one of our Making an Impact specials. Just for the listeners out there, Making an Impact development series is an annual program of events which aims to provide a rich and varied and high quality development opportunities for researchers, academic and research related professional services staff at all stages of their career across all faculties at the university. Denise, obviously, I met you at a Northwest coaching network up at Edge Hill one day, and obviously now you're working with the university and in terms of working with the academy, running some of the programs that we have in our leadership space. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, I've probably been working around the university for around 10 years, but in that coaching space and leadership space, I've been working with the academy, running something called Stepping into Management, which is for new managers, so that's on that side. But I've been working with researchers, probably for about, of those 10 years, probably around the last 6 or 7.
Brilliant. Okay. And Angela is a part of the academy, and it's great to be speaking with another colleague today. Before we get started officially on the podcast, and we do this with every guest that we've ever had on, we would love to hear a little bit about your professional backgrounds and how you've arrived at the position that you're in now. So, Denise, could I start with you? How have you got to this point?
Gosh, well, I'm very old, so I'll try and keep it short. Okay, so I came from the corporate world. I did 20 years in the corporate world, and most of the work that I did was with managing people, I suppose that. So I'm very much a generalist. I'd worked around lots of different, and so people management was my thing. And I used to get all the naughty teams that didn't work very well. And they'd say, go and do that stuff that you do. And I'd say, you mean talk to people or kind of break a few rules? And that's where my fascination really in people came, because what I realised was, we're all different, aren't we? And so we all need different things, and we've all got different needs at work. Anyway, I had a mini midlife crisis in, probably 97, and I decided to be an entrepreneur, and I bought a little coffee cart and I did shows and events, and people thought I'd had a breakdown. And so I went from this really very well paid, amazing job in the corporate world to minimum wage overnight, and I bought a little tuk-tuk. It was a little coffee franchise, a little tuk-tuk machine. And it had an amazing espresso machine in the back. And it was just before Starbucks and Costa's had come on the high street, so you couldn't get fresh coffee out on an outdoor event.
Right.
And I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about coffee, and I was the least practical person. And researchers listen to this will love this, because the thing ran on a generator. Who knew you put oil in the generator? The thing blew up on the second day out of this, and in the middle of a field in Wales. And I had all these, engineer type people saying, have you put any oil in that, love? And I was like, oh no. Well, so there we go. So I kind of flipped life upside down really quickly. And that's where I started learning not only about business, because I didn't know anything about business, but also where I started learning about myself. And that started my journey really. And then I did some other things. We won a little business award. And all that experience actually prepared me really for coming to work with the university, because my first trip into the university was when I just trained as a coach, and I came to work with students who were looking to start businesses. And having made every mistake, I was probably very well qualified to come and say, never do this or don't do that. So then I trained around that time as after we'd sold the business. I trained as a professional coach. So I've been doing this probably about 12 years now. And I work right across the public, private and not-for-profit sector. And within the university, I've worked probably from at every level, from student up to the senior leadership team. So I came to work with one of the pro-vice chancellors back in 2015 for a couple of years, looking at enterprise and how and what actually does that mean? How can we be more enterprising as students, but also as academics and professional services staff as well? So that's a whistle-stop tour of how I got to where I am right now.
I love the tuk-tuk story.
It was just, I mean, it sounded like it had a 50cc engine, and it sounded like a hairdryer when it was going. And we were, one of the first shows we did was a motorbike show. Well, can you imagine? And like they had these really, these massive machines, these great big motorbike machines, and I had to start this thing and drive it across a field, and it was just talk about your street cred. I was just like, but anyway, they all loved it. So, and the coffee was amazing.
Well, that's it. You're a trailblazer in terms of getting coffee to the masses, proper coffee.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Well, one thing that stands out from that experience for me is that you're quite clearly a people person. You worked with people in those corporate entities. You went and sold coffee, in amongst lots of different various people at different events. It's no surprise really that you ended up going down a coaching route because you're very people orientated. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. And I didn't really know what the word coach meant. I suppose I use very much a coaching approach with my people when I was managing teams. So I used to get, very different types of teams, and they had different needs, and they had different ages and different experience. And I think in the corporate world at the time, and I see this across still in some sectors, that we can't use a one type fits all.
Yeah.
You have to, when you're managing yourself or other people or working with them, you have to be able to flex. And I think the whole thing starts with learning about yourself, which is why I love working particularly with the researchers. And I think some of the stuff that we've done in the past, that real, you become your experiment, don't you? You become your research, because you step into that space and go, gosh, I never knew I thought that, or I did that, or why do I do that?
Yeah.
So I think that's, it's those behaviours that we have, and those little habits that we want to try and change, really.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Denise. Just coming to you, Angela, can you just give us a bit of background about yourself and how you made that transition from research to developing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's been plenty of coffee in my career, but no tuk-tuk, unfortunately. So I gained my PhD at the University of Nottingham, and all of my postdoc career involved research into autoimmune disease. Firstly in adults, I did a lot of work with multiple sclerosis, and then subsequently with children, which was around autoimmune disease called juvenile lupus, and also in arthritis in children as well. In about 2015, I took on a role as a knowledge exchange scientist within what was and still is the UK's first and only experimental arthritis treatment centre for children. And it's based within the University of Liverpool, but it's out at Alder Hey Children's Hospital. And my role there was really, really varied, but generally involved trying to help the clinical teams and the lab-based teams to work well together. And then at the end of 2019, I joined the Academy as a research staff developer. And I think the role that I had as the knowledge exchange scientist, as I said, was really varied, but I found that the part that I enjoyed the most was when I sort of facilitated kind of the development or the learning of both our students and staff members as well. And so when I saw the position become available, it just felt like a very natural next step, actually.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting. The theme today, we're obviously talking about the well-being and the well-being of researchers. Denise, you've mentioned that you've been working with researchers for, did you say about 10 years now since you've been in university?
So yeah, it kind of started by accident. So I was kind of contracting for some years. I think it was about 2010. I'd started working with students, and then I got this opportunity to work with one of the pro vice chancellors at the time, and looking at enterprise. And out of a conversation, I'd started doing some coaching with students around who were thinking of starting businesses or also leading student societies. And I was using a coaching approach. So I put a little program of coaching, and we'd had a conversation with the head of chemistry at the time. And he'd said, can you do that coaching stuff with postdocs? And I didn't come from the university, so I didn't really know what a postdoc was. So I had to go and Google it. I said, well, what did they do, you know? So he said, I think it would really work. So we started this. I kind of co-created it, really. So he said, right, I'm going to send you some postdocs. So these rather cynical postdocs, researchers, came in to see me and said, well, what's all this coaching stuff? And so I told them a little bit about it, and then we co-created a program, really. And from that, of those 4 converts, if you like, about coaching and how it can empower you and to make changes and help you unlock more of your potential. I think we ended up over the time, I think we're up to about group number 8 and they're small groups of, so I tend to work, when I'm working with researchers on a coaching program, I tend to work in small groups because that's where we build the trust, and you have to have trust and you have to have a safe space to make it confidential for people to feel safe. And then what I do is we have kind of we co-create a program together. So we get, what do you want to work on? What are your challenges? What do you want to be able to do better? What gets in your way? And then we coach around that over a set period of time. And I know that the same themes kind of come up, but again, everybody's different. So so that's how it started, really. So, and that's where I fell in love with research, as that said, because what's really cool about it is, and probably going off a little bit on track here, but what I was really curious about when I started working with researchers is why they got it so quick. And I'd not really seen that in other sectors where I'd worked in. And what I realised is there's the, why are we doing this? Prove it to me first. So I had to change my coaching approach. But as a coach, it really kept me on my toes. And I was really fascinated that actually change happened really quickly because people got it. And I hadn't seen that in other sectors that I'd worked in. So it got me quite fascinated. And somebody said that my approach works really well with scientists. And I said, what's that approach then? So, your rather cynical approach. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. So I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, you should do. So you mentioned there that there were some common themes that came from some of those sessions. Could you share what some of those themes were in particular to researchers?
So too much stuff to do and not enough time to do it.
Right.
So the whole kind of work-life balance. I don't really do work-life balance. I just do balance. So I think if you love what you do, you just have a life balance. But I think we put this barrier sometimes in that is a kind of work life. So managing our time, how do you prioritize when everything's urgent? So we coached around techniques around how do we, because you can't manage your time, you can only manage yourself in relationship to time. So what gets in your way? Are you a master procrastinator? So we've got a few of them. So I saw that, but actually when people understand their relationship with time, they, and that some people are motivated right to the end, and some like to know what they're doing a week on Tuesday. That's really normal for people. So we work with, that's normal for you and that's normal for you, and we'll work within that. So time comes up lots of times. Tricky relationships, enough said. Why does that person drive me absolutely mad? Or and this person I really get on really well with. And how do I have that really tricky conversation, but authentically without causing a conflict? So, because what I also see, and not just in researchers, but generally, is that we very often, it's easy to avoid conflict and avoid that tricky conversation. But how do you do that? Confidence. I don't feel confident. And I think, again, that's not just researchers, but, we're in an academic environment and there's lots of qualifications. And, I always laugh and say, well, I've got some GCSEs. I don't have a degree. I didn't do that route. And my bit is around life experience. But really owning that and owning our strengths. So let's not focus on what you can't do, but what can you do and what's your contribution? And actually, once we start really getting in touch with that, and that's your specialist and that's your strength, that's where you start building the confidence. What else did I see?
I mean, that's quite a lot, to be fair.
Well, yeah, the other bit, I guess, is that inner critic voice that says, who do you think you are? The
imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Yeah. And again, very often, in an academic environment where there's lots of knowledge and lots of expertise, it's around, I had a great conversation one day with a researcher, and they were going to do a presentation. They're very nervous about it. And I said to them, simply by the fact that you're going to stand up there and do you've been invited to go and talk, people will automatically assume you're the expert. You don't even have to prove that. And all you could see the light bulb moment. And so we did some little coaching techniques to help her get in touch with her confidence, and she was kind of fine. So I think sometimes coaching techniques are really great with some of the themes that are coming out.
Yeah.
I say I've got like a big toolkit with lots of stuff. Try this. That might work for you, but it might not work for you. But have a go anyway.
Yeah. Angela, I guess you must see sort of similar themes coming out of the conversations that you have, with the research staff from an academy point of view.
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely. And I think up until taking this post as a research staff developer, I myself, my whole career, I have been a research member of staff. So I think, the common themes that I am hearing is something that I have heard throughout my own research career. So, absolutely the imposter syndrome, the questioning yourself, and wondering, is there a world outside of academia? I think we sort of hear that a lot, and the work pressures, the long days, that sort of inability to switch off is another thing as well. And I suppose the uncertainty, perhaps what falls around a lot of researchers with having fixed term contracts and, how can they get their next step, or how to make sure that next grant comes through, that, that they can carry on doing the research that they want to do.
Brilliant. So a lot of those themes that you're both talking about, I guess, fit within this remit that we've got for today, which is talking about researchers' well-being, and some of the other podcasts that Matt and I have recorded as well, talking to researchers, but also other colleagues from across the institution. They've talked about those themes and the impact that those themes then have on their personal well-being. So before we get into that conversation, Denise, what are we talking about when we're talking about researchers' well-being? How would we define that?
I think that's a really interesting question. And for me, well-being means different things to different people. I think there's two things, actually. I think there's a personal well-being, which we kind of are more familiar with. How much sleep we get, are we active? Our general health and well-being, what's our mental health like? Are we developing ourselves? Are we feeling fulfilled? And I think there's a personal side, but I also think there's a professional side as well. And that's around, for me, I call it psychological safety. So how safe are you at work? Are you feeling valued? Do you make a contribution? Do you feel in control of your work? And I think there's different factors. They're different influences. And one of the things that we're going to be doing in the wellbeing workshops that we've put together is around we all know how to, so if you're trying to lose weight, we all know how to do that. You just don't eat as much and go for, you do a bit more exercise. So why is it so difficult? And so what the wellbeing workshops are going to do and look at is how do you get some tips to do something about that? So for me, it's around, our wellbeing is all about, it's an inside job. It's our minds, and our brains are amazing things, but we don't know how they work very often. So it's around how do we understand ourselves more, what our motivations, what limits us, what stops us and gets in the way, because we all kind of know what to do. So I've taken two approaches to it, and again put them in, because I think actually they're the things that impacts our well-being.
I think that's really helpful. If I reflect back on my work with my students, if there's an issue impacting their well-being, then I could be the best lecturer in the world. But if there's issues going on in their life, like you said, they're not getting enough sleep, or they're worrying about something and it's having that impact on their well-being, then they're never going to learn as effectively as they could do. And I guess that's the same for your work, Angela, with researchers. If there's issues impacting their well-being, then you could be the best developer in the world, but there's always going to kind of be that barrier. Do you find there's quite a big issue in terms of researcher well-being at the moment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you have to look at the full picture. You have to look at everything involved in that. I'm not sure that it's a bigger issue than it ever has been, really. I think that there's not necessarily something new now. Of course, the COVID-19 situation has brought, strangeness in that, really. And I suppose the Welcome Reimagine Research campaign has really sort of focus on it and made it kind of more of an open discussion, I suppose. But the Academy has always done a lot of work around, the well-being of researchers, especially sort of with the Concordat, to support the career development of researchers. And for those that don't know, that's an agreement between funders and employers in the UK, and sets out expectations and responsibilities for those that are involved in research careers. And that will be people, the researchers themselves, their managers, their PIs, employers and funders. And three of the main principles of the Concordat, one of which is environment and culture. So very much thinking about, the culture, the well-being, I suppose, within that of the researchers. And I think an important example of how the Concordat sort of impacts on the University of Liverpool is the statement of expectations that the University of Liverpool has for principal investigators and researchers. And that again defines some responsibilities and the roles for research staff and PIs. And this again emphasises on leadership and communication and environment and all that sort of thing. So yes, I do think well-being may feel like it's in the forefront now, but I think it is something that has always been an issue, and something that we do have to consider with the development of staff.
Denise, can I just take you back to something you were talking about a couple of minutes ago? It sounded like they were around habits forming and how to change those habits. So as part of the coaching that you've been doing with researchers to obviously help them to feel more confident in their abilities, is part of that helping them to form new habits, and then as a result that has an impact on their well-being? Yeah,
so it's about thinking different. So it's for me, it's what's getting in the way. And if we're going to form a new habit, we need to understand what we're doing first.
Yeah.
So so I want to go out running. Okay, so what happens? Well, the alarm goes off and I go, I'll just have another 10 minutes. Okay, so what we're doing is understanding. So what happens just before? So what happens is, the way coaching works is we start getting people aware of what's the current habit that we want to change, and how does it work, and what do you need to do different. So coaching's grounded in neuroscience, and so and one of the things that I work with researchers, particularly more so than in any other sector, is that they like the neuroscience, because they like to understand why. Who's this weird woman that's coming in asking us these weird questions, but actually what happens in your brain when you wake up in the morning, And actually, there are two parts of your brain, without going into the neuroscience now, but you've got two parts of your brain. You've got you, who's really smart and confident and pretty cool. And then you've got an emotional part of your brain, which is the reptilian brain. And that's the bit that causes us some issues. So that's a lot of the work that I do. I refer to a guy called Steve Peters, who wrote a book called The Chimp Paradox. And he uses a really cool little model. And we're going to be talking about that in our sessions.
I've read that book.
Yeah. What did you think?
Oh, it's fascinating, especially the part where it's explaining about how the chimp can overpower you within a millisecond, and you don't realize the chimp is there. And a prime example of the chimp coming out is in a moment of road rage, where you're absolutely fine, you're driving along, but someone does something slightly, it might come across as aggressive, and all of a sudden the chimp just takes control out of everything. And all of a sudden you're not thinking anymore of that conscious self. The chimp's in control, and the chimp's swearing, pressing the horn, going crazy. Yeah, fascinating book. Really enjoyed it.
It's really interesting. I as well as working with researchers, I do one-on-one coaching with academics, and I had this great little story. And obviously, the person is nameless, but we were talking about this, the model of the chimp. So you've got you, your best self, and you've got this chimp, which is your reptilian, and actually, it's only designed to keep you safe. It's your emotional thinking machine, and it's designed, and it thinks really differently to you. And she has terrible road rage, and she has a camper van. She loves a camper van, and she used to come into the university, and she had quite a drive each morning. And she said, and she was late this morning. We had this session, and she was like tunnering on, and she said, this happens every morning. And I said, it sounds like your chimp, like driving the van to the university. And that's absolutely right. I said, well, what would it be like if you left your chimp at home or left it in the passenger seat? So we did some kind of coaching around that to try and calm her down. She said it's much better when she drove and she left her chimp. So it's a nice little model, and we go into it in a little bit more detail. And I'm not attached to it, there's lots of nice, good models.
Yeah.
But I like his is because, one, it's grounded. He's a consultant psychiatrist. He's he knows his stuff. So, and I think a lot of people resonate with the model. So, and again, going back to your original question, it is around understanding. Wellbeing comes from understanding and making those habit changes around how your brain works.
Yeah,
that's where the change comes.
And Angela, this is obviously a really important theme for making an impact. So I take it that's about the things you were talking about, just in terms of Concordat and so on. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think it really brings back to what Alex said as well, actually, with all of this, is that, making an impact is absolutely, well, we hope is going to provide a rich and varied programme of development opportunities and activities for our researchers. But part of that is making sure that their heads are in the right place to be able to accept and absorb this information. And I think that's why the sessions that Denise is talking about are really important to have as part of, these types of events, or linking on through our Research Staff Association, which, Denise is going to be doing some of these wellbeing events through, is that, again, having to look at the whole picture and making sure that our heads are in the right place so that we really can take these opportunities, these development opportunities, as effectively and efficiently as we can.
I think going on from what Angela said as well is that actually, one of the requirements of being a researcher is to innovate. If we're not looking after ourselves and we are anxious or fearful or frustrated, our brain chemicals are very different to those where we need to be able to innovate. So I think it starts by really simply understanding, if I'm anxious, I can't innovate. So how do I make that change, and what's getting in the way of me being anxious, and how can I stop that?
So Denise, could you give us a couple of the kind of practical tips that you give people in your coaching in terms of addressing exactly what you've just said?
So there's a couple of things around the mind management stuff. So this came from a researcher, and he was going for an interview, and he said, I'm not very good at interviews. And I said, well, who's told you that? So I said, well, how did you get this job then? Oh, okay. So you must have, did you have an interview for this? Oh, yes. Okay. So you must be okay. So anyway, so what we did was we understood, so where's that come from? And actually, it had come from some time ago. It'd gone for an interview. It had gone horrendous. It was a very traumatic experience. But actually, the brain had lodged that as a memory. Okay. So what happened was he catastrophized that every time he was going to go for an interview, then that was going to come up. So actually, so the tip is to understand is that true? And actually, how can you start to become aware of what you're thinking and what would be a more helpful thought. So he'd made up a whole story that he wasn't very good at interviews. And what we did was we got some evidence to say, well, actually, is that true? Well, it wasn't on that occasion, but on another 6 times then it was. So, and then very often when you're working with coaching, I take them to what's the worst thing? So very often is, I want to apply for this job, and then they give me 36 reasons why they're not going to and why they won't get it, all in the same sentence. I go, wow, that's amazing. So let's just break that down, okay? And it's that chimp brain. So the chimp is thinking, oh my gosh. So I said, what's the worst thing that happens if you go for that interview? Won't get the job. And then what happens? Just apply for another one. So very often it's just a coaching role very often is offering a different perspective. And again, people work differently. So within the research community, there's a lot of probably more introverted and reflective people than they're more extroverted. And I'm very much generalizing here. But with a more extroverted person, they might talk that out, whereas an introverted person will reflect it. And both can catastrophize, but they'll do it in different ways. So if I'm working with a group of researchers, what very often we'll do that exercise. So who thinks more like this and who thinks more like this? And how does that show up in your world? Because you'll have to, it's no good saying to the introverted person who likes to sit and reflect, well, you need to stand up and shout and do that, because that's just not going to work. You need to get coaching tips and solutions that are going to work for that person. And they all have the lovely thing about coaching, the fundamental belief in coaching is that the person that I'm working with, the researcher, the academic, whoever it is resourceful and whole. They're the expert in their life. I'm not there to tell them anything. I might have some tips, but my job is to ask questions so that they're empowered they know the answers, 100% know the answers or know where to get them.
Yeah, and I guess as you tease that out, the outcome is that is usually a positive impact in terms of their well-being. Is that right?
100%, yeah. 100%, because very often it's I feel better, simply sometimes having the opportunity to talk in a safe space. So in the small groups with researchers, very often it can be quite lonely. I'm feeling this, I'm not very good at this, or I feel like I'm drowning in work. And you put a few people together and have a conversation. You don't change the problem or the challenge, but you just feel more normal about it. Oh, okay, well, I'm not on my own with that. So that's that, and that changes your brain chemicals, so that starts making you feel better anyway.
So Angela, I know that researchers' wellbeing is one of the key themes for making an impact, but you've got lots of other really exciting stuff planned. And you were starting to tell us a little bit about that earlier. Do you want to just give us a quick synopsis of what's involved in making an impact? Because obviously, has it moved online because of the COVID-19 situation?
Yeah, no, so absolutely. So yeah, no, COVID-19 has definitely played a part in how making an impact this year is going to run. So it's going to be an entirely online event. And I suppose in that way, it will perhaps look and feel a little different to it has in previous years. we've had to think a lot of consideration around that, actually, with regards to, screen time fatigue that people may feel, and also the length of which you can have sessions, and even the simple things around broadband speeds when you have other people in the home that are needing or streaming or in conferences and all that sort of stuff, and the distractions that you have at home as well, with maybe children or other, your partner or whatever needing to work as well. And so, we've really taken that into consideration. So working with people, like Denise, in making the sessions a little bit shorter, or, them to be accessible in a different type of way, I suppose, and how we can use web chats and tweet chats and all that sort of stuff around it. But it will still be rich, it will still be varied, it will still look at lots of different ways in which you can make impact. And we have our clusters that look at impact outside of academia, and in a digital agenda, and with policy and health and society and that kind of thing as well. We've got some really great keynotes this year to keep an eye out for as well. So we've got Beth Thompson from Wellcome Trust, as well as others as well. And again, we have some sessions on entrepreneurial skills, on collaborations globally, and also looking at again, yes, wellbeing and the culture as well. Our Research Staff Association are going to be running a couple of our cafe cultures, looking at how we can have hopefully a better research culture as well. So many things to be involved in, and many things to do.
Brilliant. Sounds like lots of really good stuff. And is it just for researchers?
So no, it's well, I suppose yes and no. It's for professional services staff as well, that are involved in research too. But it's open to all research staff across the whole of the university, whatever level in your career, and across every faculty as well. And we hope to launch the programme very soon. By the time this podcast is out, it should be out there. And yes, absolutely. There should be hopefully lots of stuff for everyone, and the way we run this programme as well is thinking about all those clusters that I've sort of mentioned there and beyond, is that the participants should hopefully be able to tailor their own programme. So if you're really interested in how you can make an impact outside academia, for instance, then there'll be sessions that will be sort of coded that way, so you'll know which ones that you can dip in and out of too.
Wonderful. And we'll link to all of that on the website as well in the show notes for this podcast. And it's running mainly from the 1st to the 19th of June. Is that correct?
That's correct as well. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have lots of online resources, as you suggest, within our web pages as well, that can then be accessed outside of, obviously, the Making an Impact weeks as well, and hopefully be a resource that people can, get access to, throughout the year and beyond.
That's amazing. Goes without saying, you've done a massive thing moving it all online in such a short space of time, but it sounds like a brilliant programme. Denise, how's the current COVID situation impacted you and the work that you do?
Well, it's quite interesting, really. I run a private coaching practice, and I've got virtual clients anyway. So I think my furthest client I've worked with is in Bangladesh. So
Wow.
And we did some leadership work with a team in a hospital in the Middle East, myself and another coach, and we supported them virtually. We went out there and did some leadership work, but then when we came back, we did web chats and stuff like that. So that hasn't changed that much. I think what I've found is that some of the clients who have been used to working face to face, it's kind of taken a shift. And I think when this all first hit, there's what I call a lot of noise in the system. So I was very sensitive in terms of letting people come around. There was lots of people wanted to help, and actually people didn't have the capacity. So I think, and I was just saying to Matt earlier on, that I'm noticing now it's becoming, it's a little bit more familiar. There's still quite a lot of anxiety out there. But I think people are starting to look forward. And I think that, what will that look like? So I think, and I'm no different. I will say, just because I'm a coach, I'm human as well. There's that, obviously I run a business, and there was that initial impact of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But I'm doing some work with NHS England, so I'm really privileged to be part of a team that's going into work with primary care, and we started that. I was on the Sunday night shift, so that's giving people in primary care, GPs, practice nurses, NHS, pharmacists, an opportunity to access a coach if they want to talk. So, and that's all virtual as well. So I think that's sort of my contribution. But I think there's a silver line in it. I think it's very sad. There's lots of very awful things happened. But I actually think from a human point of view, I really do hope that this will make people, that we've pressed the pause button. And I think for me, it's not about going back to normal. It's about moving forward into something different.
Sure, I think you're right. So many people are saying that in terms of actually it's a horrific situation, but it has forced people to kind of reevaluate and look at how we're going to move forward for the future. What do you think the lasting effects will be, Denise, in terms of COVID-19 for the research community specifically?
That's a really good question. I think it comes back to individuals. I think that, there's what can you control and what can you influence? And you can't control, I don't know what the landscape will look like for researchers. There'll be lots of worry and a lot of noise about, pots of funding and will this still be available? However, there's also a great opportunity, and I think going back to our well-being is, and if we're looking after ourselves, I have this little saying, it's a top tip, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help anybody else. So if you're well and you're doing your best and you're playing to your strengths and you're looking for opportunities to innovate, and you'll get it, and you're looking ahead about what contribution you can make rather than what's gone bad and didn't work. It's like, what can I learn from this opportunity and how can I take that learning forward? That can only be positive.
Yeah, and I guess, Angela, those tips are really helpful specifically for our community, our research community at the University of Liverpool, would you say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's there have been lessons I think we have learned from having to move an event such like Making an Impact online or in a different format, in considering not just the technology but also what that means in people's lives. Just as I was saying before, with thinking about everything else that happens, at the moment we're not just working from home, we're working from home in a crisis situation. And I think what we've been thinking about with Making an Impact, with making it an online event, is we have definitely been thinking a bit more about what that means to researchers themselves, not just as a development opportunity as well, but how can we really help it to make it more accessible and easier to them because of the situation we're in. And I'd really like to think that one of the positives in moving forward from that is for me personally anyway, is that that's something that I always consider. I'd like to think I did that anyway, but I think this has really made me reflect even more on what events or activities or development opportunities that we're providing, what does that actually mean, and how accessible actually is it to people to be able to engage with it. And maybe moving forward, I'd like to think that Making an Impact next year can be a more face-to-face event again, but may well have elements of that will stay online because of the fact that it has enabled people that have got caring responsibilities or are unable to, take travel to, even just a place on campus, that they can sit at their computer and they can access that session half an hour in the morning or during a coffee break or whatever. And so I think moving forward, hopefully we can bring that as well into how we look at how we format things as well.
And one of the really genius things that you've done, which I've noticed, and really, really practical, is res dev in your PJs, which I love the idea of. Matt, I think we need to start podcast in your PJs. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when we realised, that the vast majority of us were going to be working from home, we really wanted to find a way that we could sort of virtually reach out to our researchers, let them know that we're still here, we still care and that we're 100% committed to, you know, supporting their development and also the community networking and that kind of thing. So we came up with this idea of Res Dev in your PJs, and it includes alternating weekly sort of little bite-sized videos that Hollywood will definitely not be calling on my door anyway, but they're there, and we talk a little bit about our Research Staff Association. We have shown the resources that are available online. We have got one coming up that's talking about some of the Wellbeing resources that we have within the university as well, and many other topics too. And then on the other week, we have these Twitter check-ins. And so again, our Research Staff Association have been great in supporting us with that. But yeah, we just have through our @Live Researcher Twitter account, we just have some little chats with the research community, how they're getting on, you know, some tips and advice and all that sort of stuff, and also you know, some other daft little things about, you know, what's the picture that you can see behind you, or your coffee cup and those sorts of things, just to keep us all connected, really.
I think that's a great idea, and I think that's really interesting, Angela, what you were saying about the keeping connected. And it's, for me, it's that social connection. So last week, I've been working with a leadership team in one of the faculties, and obviously the working from home bit, rather than just, they were doing a lot of business as usual stuff, and we'd started some leadership work, and I just wanted to keep connected. So I offered, and we did something called a team tea break, and it ran something like this. Everyone had to bring something to the call that was important to them. It couldn't be alive, so no children, partners or anything, animals, unless there was a picture. And they had 2 minutes to talk, and I facilitated it. So you have 2 minutes to talk about this thing that you've brought and why it's important. And then there was room for 1 or 2 questions. It was only an hour, so it wasn't like very long. We didn't anything business as usual, and it was amazing. We had a terracotta warrior. We had a hip flask from the 19th century that was someone's great-grandfather. We had a piano in the back. We didn't get him to play a tune, unfortunately, but it was such what was lovely about it, apart from being fun, was actually this team got to know things about each other that it probably would never have done in the kind of, if this hadn't have happened. So it was a lovely way to start keeping that connection and building that trust, and have a nice cup of tea as well.
Yeah, I can relate to that, Denise. We've, as a team, the academic developers, we've been meeting every day. And then on a Friday during our team meeting, we don't talk work at all. And we do something very similar. You know, some of us are baking for the first time. You know, some of us are, I'm even growing potatoes. I thought potatoes were potatoes, but apparently there are baby potatoes that you have to grow to get new potatoes. You know, we've been sharing all those kind of things. And I know more about my team in the last month than I have in the last year. And for me, that's been really, really important, and a great support for everyone on the team at this difficult time. Well, thanks both. That's been a really interesting and helpful conversation. We like to finish each podcast by asking our guests to just give us 1 or 2 hints or tips for our listeners to reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So, Angela, if we start with you, if you could give our listeners a couple of tips, what would they be?
So I suppose in thinking about the organisation of the Making an Impact event, and I think hopefully when we look at the other side of it, this will hang true as well. And I think where it feels like the sessions that have worked or are going to work the best are ones where we really have connected with the community that these sessions are going to be for, in helping to design that session. So a co-creation of those sessions. And that's something that we very much have done with Denise and some of the other facilitators that are providing sessions.
Brilliant, thank you. And what about yourself, Denise?
I think at this time in particular, I would say, you know, there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of worry around, and have a think about, if you can't control it, let it go, but think about what you can influence That's the first thing. So if you can't control it, let it go, and look at what you can control. And the other is be kind to yourself. You know, are you treating yourself like you would your best friend? Do you speak to yourself like you would your best friend? Or have you got a really harsh inner critic voice? And I think if you can start becoming aware of what you're telling yourself right now, you know, we're in a pandemic. It's okay to have a couple of days where it might be a bit, you know, not too great. So just be gentle and kind to yourself, and yeah.
Wonderful.
Could I just also add, I'd say just stay connected as well. So for me, obviously, I would say that, you know, being involved with our Research Staff Association or whatever, that's a great way of being connected, but it doesn't need to be that way either. I just think staying connected with others during this time is really important in whichever way is best for you.
That's great. Thank you both. We've really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, great. Thanks for your time. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that podcast. One of the things that Denise was talking about, and what really resonated with me, was when she was saying about thinking about the things that we can control and influence, and if you can't control them, then you need to let it go. And that's really, really relevant at the moment in terms of COVID-19 and being in lockdown. And another thing she was saying was, at the same time of all of this, we need to be kind to ourselves about it. So, if we can't control it, just being able to let it go and be kind to ourselves will really help us long term.
Yeah, I think you're right. Kindness is a theme that comes up in quite a few of our podcasts at the moment. I think what she was saying about how colleagues that she meets in academia, particularly academic colleagues, often struggle with that kind of inner critic and that pressure that they put on themselves, potentially related to imposter syndrome. And she talked about how coaching can really help with that in terms of confidence building. And I think, as you say, kindness is a key component to that as well. Mm. Well, there's lots of really good stuff in that podcast. So please do let us know what you think in terms of anything that stood out to you. We really enjoy hearing from you. Please do tweet us at Liverpool Uni Academy, or you can tweet us direct at eLearnerMatt or at Alexandra_Owen. Please do get in touch and tell us what you think about this conversation. Also, if you'd like to take your thinking and your reflections further, we have added a specific reading list to the website linked to this discussion, and you can find that at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. So do check out that reading list.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. So if you've listened and enjoyed this episode in particular, please rate or even better review this show, as it really does help get us noticed, and therefore more people will find us as a result. Also, I know a lot of you have listened and not yet subscribed, so do hit the follow or subscribe button now and keep up to date with all of our latest episodes. Bye for now.